500,000 malware samples every single day.
Gosh, it sounds horrible.
Will the attackers, the Russian GRU, be expanding their operations beyond Ukraine?
So practically nobody's safe.
We will improve our technologies. They will find ways to evade that. The cycle will continue.
You said it's so great they found my malware.
Or it would be more vulgar typically.
Okay. Oh, would it? Okay. Hello and welcome to Unlocked 403, our new cybersecurity podcast brought to you by ESET. We're here to talk about cybersecurity, IT, technology, sciences, and much, much more. We understand that technological progress is going by really fast and can sometimes be hard to understand. Luckily for us, we have access to the experts who can unlock that knowledge for us. My name is Bex, and I have been working in cybersecurity for almost 3 years now, and I will be your host. On today's episode, we will talk about threat intelligence, what it is, how it works, and its place in threat defense. With me today, I have Robert Lipowski, a real-life malware researcher who has agreed to answer all of my questions. So welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Robert Lipowski. I'm the principal threat intelligence researcher at ESET. So let's talk about threat intelligence. I've been doing hands-on malware analysis and then research for the past almost 20 years. During that time, I've seen a lot. I've seen how the threats have evolved and all types of categories. And
So let's start from the very basics. What is a malware researcher?
Malware is a tool in the hands of attackers used to attack all types of victims, whether it's an individual or a company or a large enterprise or a government institution. One way I like to think about it, it's just a tool to accomplish those goals. And as researchers and analysts, we analyze and research the malware and how they're evolving, and then digest and transform the results of that research into several forms of output. One of them is feeding back to our detection teams to be able to develop better protections, better grade detection capability, better scanners, and so on in order to protect our users. But there are other outputs as well. There is things like awareness, what we are doing now. And it's a very key component of everything because there are the technical aspects of protecting yourself, and then there are the non-technical aspects. So user education is very important. And as I said, it applies to all levels. It applies to individuals, whether they want to protect their own bank accounts, their privacy, and so on. And it applies to employees in companies or whatever size. So we analyze, we study the threats, how they're evolving in order to try to stay ahead of the attackers.
So that's really interesting what you mentioned. I read somewhere that like 80% of attacks happen because of human error. Something like that. So awareness is really important in that way, right?
It is very important. And the attackers know that. And it's much more effective for the attackers to exploit these, I call them human vulnerabilities, rather than the technical vulnerabilities. They get a better return on investment. I mean, why invest so much effort and resources into finding those bugs in code, which is complicated, where they can try to social engineer someone into giving their password much more easily.
So the person is the bug?
In a way.
In a way. So where does threat intelligence play into that? What is it?
So maybe let's start off with what is intelligence. So it's very analogous to intelligence in the old school terminology, like
spies.
Exactly. Intelligence agencies. Yeah. Spying is no longer like it used to be in the James Bond movies, old school, but it's all online, a lot more effective that way. There's a difference between information, which is raw data, and intelligence, which is extended basically. So it's enhanced with context. And the most important thing in our industry is that the intelligence is actionable. So it also provides some type of advice what the recipient of that intelligence can do to utilize it some way. And cyber threat intelligence is something similar, but for cyber threats. So
Okay.
so that's like the raw part. But then there is for threat intelligence, we write reports on what we've seen. We do attribution based on that threat intelligence, meaning these large corporations, enterprises, and government agencies don't just care about the fact that they have been targeted or infected, but they are interested in who have they been targeted by. So that is also something that we are doing. So in our threat intelligence APT reports, we will tell them, okay, with so and so amount of probability, if you have seen these indicators in your organization, then you have been attacked by the Russians, the Chinese, or whoever. So that is an extension of the threat intelligence.
But you don't tell them what they should do you do.
We
it's part of
do
it.
that.
Okay.
We do that as well. So the threat intelligence, it's divided based on the recipients, who they are, whether it's an analyst or whether it's a CISO and so on. So it's the data feeds that goes into the automated systems all the way to the reports, which are being read by humans, and it can be operational, it can be strategic, it can be tactical. So there are different types of threat intelligence.
My next question on that would be, how do you gather or how do you analyze it? Because you mentioned that you need to analyze in order to make some sense of it, if I understand correctly. So how exactly do you gather this data?
Yeah. So there are several sources, but by far the main and the most important source is our user base. So
What does that mean?
That means users of our security software,
Okay.
when they opt in to provide us information on detected or suspected malware or intrusions, and that will be fed to our system, anonymized of any personal information, and we will then be able to learn about new types of malware, new techniques that the attackers might be using. Just to give you a rough scale, we're getting around 400, 500,000, just on average, 500,000 malware samples every single day.
No.
And those are unique. So now I'm not talking about duplicates. I'm talking about new unique malware samples every single day.
5,000?
400 to 500,000 unique malicious binaries that we have never seen before, but we are detecting them. So that also says something about our proactive detection capability, because we are able to, of course, there's also malware which we see repeatedly. We've seen that before, but I'm not counting that.
Right.
The majority of that is crimeware. So that's the things that cyber criminals use for their financial purposes. And among that huge amount of data, of course, there's no way of processing them manually.
I was thinking, like, you can go through 400,000 or 500,000 samples of anything.
Exactly.
So
that's where our automated systems come in: machine learning, AI, and just automated systems in general, which are able to cluster this large volume of data and samples, look for similarities, highlight things that are unique, things that stand out. And if it's something new, then we have to understand if there are any new techniques that it's been using. How can we improve that detection? Because for sure, the attackers will modify, they will try to evade the detection. So we have to analyze we call it TTPs, stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. So yeah, we are analyzing every step of the attack chain. And of course, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, because the main purpose of why we are doing this stuff is protecting the users. So our security software primarily tries to block the attacks as early on in the attack chain as possible. But by that, we are cutting off the information of what would happen if the attack continued.
Okay.
Right? So there are many cases, and when someone asks me, for example, so what was the prevented damage when we discovered some type of threat? And I would answer, I don't know, because we blocked
never let it.
Exactly. So And then there is another attack a month later, and then we collect the bits of information and the intelligence from all these attacks, and we cluster them.
Okay.
And we're able to say, okay, so these attacks, for example, were performed by the same threat actor because they have code similarities or they use shared infrastructure and things like that. Over that time, for example, in the beginning, we might have low confidence on some attribution or something, but later on, after we've seen more attacks of that nature, we would be able to see, okay, so because we have seen these 5+ clues, then our confidence is higher and we can say, okay, so this is that particular attack.
Do you also think we have better researchers?
I would say yes. I would say we do. I mean, we are a very research-oriented company, a lot more than a typical company. So yeah, research and the technologies is a priority for ESET. So that definitely is a strength. We are the number one endpoint security provider protecting Ukrainian organizations. That's both public sector and private organizations. So we are able to see all those types of attacks, like Sandworm, for example, happening, and then that allows us to analyze this threat intelligence.
We've talked about different types of threats and different type of intelligence, and there is a difference between a software and a hardware threat. Is there such a thing? Like, is it possible to infect a device through a socket? Is that even the thing?
When we're going lower from software to hardware, there is something in between, which is called firmware. It's basically software, but it's much closer to the chips than the regular higher level software. And that itself also has bugs that can be exploited.
But there's no such thing like a type of threat that can like destroy the hardware itself. Like, there's no such thing, right?
It's not so simple, but there have been rare cases where attackers try to do that, actually.
How?
That is, I would say, one of the most interesting cases that we were ever involved in analyzing, and one of our greatest cyber discoveries. That was InDestroyer back in December 2016. And that attacked an electrical transmission substation in Ukraine. This happened in December, so this was a couple days before Christmas, actually, and carried out by Sandworm. It's one of the most infamous APT groups that are carrying out not only espionage attacks, but also sabotage. So this was one of those sabotage attacks. They
have their tentacles everywhere.
Yeah, they tried to disrupt the flow of electricity, which they managed to do for a short limited amount of time, about 1 hour blackout. But they wanted to accomplish more than they actually did. So essentially, they failed. They had much higher ambitions, because if you think about it, causing a blackout of around 1 hour around midnight is definitely not the worst that they could have done. Based on more analysis that we did afterwards, the scenario was supposed to go like this. First, they create a blackout, cause the lights in half of the city to go dark. At the same time, there were two other components to that attack. The first one was to wipe the machines, the controlling workstations that the operators were using to monitor the environment. So you can imagine a bunch of lights, a bunch of screens, something like that.
Like you see on TV.
Something that you see in the movies, basically. Yeah. And imagine that all of those computers are wiped. They're not working. The operators can't use them. And the purpose of that part of the attack was to deny the operators visibility and control. So this would be at the time that the lights are out, they try to sit down and fix the problem, find out what's going on. They wouldn't be able to do that. Right. A third component to amplify the impact of that attack was that they were going after a special type of device called a protection relay.
Which is?
And as the name suggests, its purpose is to protect the power grid, basically. And the attackers were especially focused on a particular make and vendor of these protection relays, trying to make them inoperable.
Okay.
So add that to what's happening. So that protection relay is taken offline. It's not doing its job. It's not protecting the grid. So the actual damage that was supposed to be done was not the de-energization part, the switching off the light. The actual damage was supposed to happen after, because once the blackout is done, the operators, obviously their main goal is to restore power, right? To flip the switches back up, and they can do that manually, even if their systems are compromised. But if they didn't have that visibility into what's going on, if those protection relays had been taken offline, then restoring the power in such a state could have led to an overload in part of the grid and even physical damage to some of those devices. In that case, it was not successful. So that's the good news. But if it had, then the damage would not be a blackout lasting 1 hour, but it could have led to actual physical damage of that equipment. And then it would have to be repaired or replaced.
Well, you don't want that in a power grid, do you?
Absolutely. So,
gosh, it sounds horrible. Thank God it stopped. How did it stop?
It was a combination of errors on behalf of the attackers and good response from the defenders. So also the operators, they were prepared, and with our help as well.
I might remember it wrong, but there was something about Indestroyer 2 in the recent years. So what was that about? Was that the same, or?
Yeah, so that was very interesting, because the big question was, okay, so what's next? Will there be another Indestroyer attack? Will the attackers, the Russian GRU, be expanding their operations beyond Ukraine? Should other governments, other power grids be worried to watch out for these attacks? Because the malware and the attack didn't fulfill its potential. So the question was, what's next? And for over 5 years, we haven't seen anything until April 2022. During the war, we found a new version of Indestroyer. So again, being deployed at distribution substation. So there's distribution and transmission. So this was distribution substation in Ukraine. That time the attack was even less successful than the one in 2016. Again, fast response, great cooperation of us, ESET analysts and researchers, and the Ukrainian operators and defenders, and the CERT, the computer emergency response team. So that was good, but it was a big discovery.
Is it also that the protection is getting better? Does that play into that, or?
It is, and there is this shift of what we typically would see in the past with these groups was that they would use custom-made malware. Indestroyer is one of those examples, and many others as well, is that the APT group, for example, it will develop this specific malware for that purpose, and it's unique to them. It's kind of their fingerprint, so we know that this is that group. In order to stay more anonymous, they would nowadays typically use, we call it living off the land techniques. Basically, they gain access somehow to that environment, and then they will use tools which are legitimate, for example, used by network administrators of some organization or company, but they can be misused by the attackers. And then from a detection and protection point of view, it's very different, because with the malware, it was fairly simple. So it's malware. As we know it's malware, we have to detect it, flag it as bad. But if it's just a legitimate tool that's abused, we don't detect it as bad. We have to use different detection methodology, and so also the detection game has to evolve to take these things into account.
So practically nobody's safe. That's what I gather.
There's always advice we can give and ways that users can improve their resilience. So I wouldn't paint it that bad.
Okay, good, good. I like that. All right, let's get back to your life as a security threat intelligence researcher. So if you had to, like, how long have you been a researcher?
Since 2007, so
It's a
16
long
years.
time. So what does a person need to do or have to be a researcher? Do you need to have engineering background, or can just an average person that's interested in the topic become one?
I would say one of the main prerequisites is, and I know this sounds like a cliche, but it's the willingness and interest to learn new stuff.
Okay.
Because and natural curiosity, and because the main technique that we use when analyzing the malware is, we call it reverse engineering. And you can think of it as the opposite of programming. So if you're a software developer, you would have some specification, and you would write some code based on that. So you're creating code. Reverse engineering is the exact opposite. So there's code written by someone else. You don't know what it's doing. You don't know how it works. And you will try to analyze it. You will have try to tear it apart and understand how it works. So it's an ideal discipline for those people who, as kids, they would like to tear down their toys and understand how they worked on the inside. So that kind of mindset is what's needed in our field of work. For the technical parts, yes, of course, having a software background, being able to understand programming languages is definitely something that's needed. But it's one doesn't have to be the best programmer or developer. They have to understand the code. They don't necessarily have to be an expert in one particular programming language, because malware is written in a variety of programming languages. But of course, having knowledge in that how that works is also useful, and it's also useful if you're able to write your own various scripts to automate your work and help you out with the analysis and things like that.
So you have to be creative, just like the attackers.
Yeah.
Do you need to think like one?
In a way, yeah. I mean, you have to understand how they operate, and the question that we all ask ourselves is, how do we make the attacker's job the hardest as we can? As I mentioned earlier, an attacker typically goes for those cyber criminals. They are a business person, so they would typically go after the lowest hanging fruits. They would typically go after those things that bring them the best return on their investment. But the way to play this game from our point of view is, how do we make the detection layers, the detection technologies in such a way that it will be, because it will be a constant cycle of a cat and mouse. So we will improve our technologies. They will find ways to evade that, and then the cycle will continue. But the main question is, how do we continue improving and adding detection capabilities that's an easy step for us, and making it much difficult for the attackers to evade, ideally until the point that they give up.
Right.
Interestingly, sometimes if we find various, let's call them Easter eggs or messages in the code where the malware operators or the malware authors would somehow express their frustration of us interrupting their work and detecting their malware. They do it from time to time. We find such things, and it's always a good thing to see when they're complaining about our work. So we're doing something.
ESET is so great. They found my malware.
Yeah, or it would be more vulgar typically.
Okay. Oh, would it? Okay. Let's just not say that. A lot of people maybe could be interested in if I had the brains, I'd totally want to be a researcher, because it sounds just fascinating. Like, you're the first person to know about an APT group or about an attack, and it's just new and exciting and catastrophic in a way, which is, very attractive to a person's mind. So if you had to maybe say what was the most thrilling experience in the field that you've had so far?
It was definitely the discovery of malware, which we haven't seen before, which is something unique. So that is the attack against the Ukrainian power grid using Indestroyer. I would compare it to being the only second to Stuxnet back in 2010 that went after the Iranian nuclear program to spin centrifuges out of control. And it's that unique bridging of IT and OT in this industrial environment. That's something that we just don't see on an everyday basis. So that would definitely be my most memorable discoveries.
Okay, let's see what comes next then.
Let's see.
Yeah, well, hopefully nothing bad. I mean, I know you're kind of hoping for something bad, but as average Joes, we're hoping for peace and quiet.
I mean, we will discover attacks. I mean, that's the reality that we have to anticipate. But the big question is or the main goal is to mitigate those attacks and making sure that they don't cause any catastrophic damage.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope for that. Sometimes it feels to me from what you're saying is that even when you said that you sometimes have to think like a criminal, researchers and criminals are fairly similar, right? In a way that you think about like what could be the next thing and how do we either attack it or protect it, right? So what's the difference? I mean, I know you're the good guys and the bad guys, but apart from that, is there a difference?
From a practical point of view, I mean, from an organizational mindset, how to approach defending their organization, there is one crucial difference. And whether we like to admit it or not, the attackers are at an advantage because they typically just have to find one point of entry to get in an organization's network. Whereas as defenders, we have to protect all the possible entry points. So it's not an easy task. And the only solution to that is using multiple detection layers. So, I mean, if we don't catch them in this step, so we need to have all other opportunities to detect their steps at some other point.
Okay. So would you say that's like the biggest difference?
From a practical point of view, yeah.
Okay, right. What would you say to some people? Because some people I find believe that there is no point in protecting myself at all. Like they already know everything. Like why should they care about me or my data? What would you say to people like that?
I would say people with such mindsets are the first targets of the regular cyber criminals. Because as I said, they typically go after the lowest hanging fruits. Yeah. I mean, sure, with enough resources, attackers could manage to compromise anyone if they invest enough resources. Why go after those people that are the hardest to compromise if there's a lot of people who just don't care? And that's not really an excuse.
Okay. So everybody should remember that. And I want to thank you for coming today. And to everybody watching, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment on this video or on the podcast platform that you're listening to this. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All of our links and all of other additional information you can find in the description below. Make sure you check out Willow Security for more information on threat intelligence and our threat reports, APT reports, and all the good stuff. And hope to see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.